The Chicago Bears offensive line had its best game of the season against the Carolina Panthers. Have they made a breakthrough, or was that just a bad Panthers defense making this Bears offensive line look particularly good?
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, we take a closer look at the success of this Chicago Bears offensive line this week against the Carolina Panthers and what it means for that group moving forward. That includes the emergence of backup left guard Bill Murray, who seems to be one of the heroes of this game that people are getting excited about. On a small sample size, he played really, really well, and we'll use that to kind of look at, what should this Chicago Bears offensive line look like moving forward? What's the best combination for this group, and how might this concoction shake out with a game in London this week and then a bye week afterwards to really straighten out and figure out what you want this offensive line to look like for the rest of the year, and the role that coaching, play calling, and scheme play in this process as well. But it was clear that not only did Caleb Williams have his best game against the Panthers, but the offensive line did as well. And a lot of that was reflected in what they were able to do for Caleb Williams and how effective Caleb was from a clean pocket, and also how little things got messy for him up front. Like against the Panthers, Caleb Williams was under pressure on just 6 passing plays. He was 0 for 2 with a couple of sacks and a couple of scrambles in there, a sack and a couple of scrambles in there as well, but barely moved off of his spot. Plenty of time in the pocket. He had his longest average time to throw of any play, of any game this season. Even on plays, where he was kept clean, he wasn't even forced to get rid of it super, super quickly. The Panthers blitzed Caleb Williams 12 times, and on those 12 blitzes, only 2 of them generated pressure. That's credit to this Chicago Bears offensive line, to the offensive coaching staff for giving them answers against the blitz, leaving extra blockers in there to pick it up, and also giving Caleb Williams checkdowns and other quicker passing options on those plays so that the blitz couldn't get home and the blitz couldn't rattle him and get him under pressure and lead to less effective offense all around for the Bears here. We've seen Caleb Williams be phenomenal against the blitz over the last couple of games. In this one, he was 9 for 11 for 145 yards and a touchdown against the blitz, a passer rating of 149.1. When the Panthers sent extra pass rushers, the Bears picked it up. Caleb Williams had time, and he delivered some really impressive throws, one of which was the touchdown to DJ Moore, the first one, when he goes on the deep crossing route and is pretty open on the far right side of the field, then turns upfield and runs it in for an end zone. They brought extra pass rushers, but Cole Kmet and DeAndre Swift picked up the blitz perfectly. Caleb Williams had time in the pocket, could step up, hit DJ Moore wide open for the score. That's what the whole offensive operation together is supposed to look like. The line gives them time. The backs and tight ends help pick up the blitz. Receivers get open and run nice routes downfield. Quarterback delivers an accurate ball. Receivers make plays after the catch. That's the whole proof of concept. That's the whole formula. And it started with this Bears offensive line playing better. If you look at their pass blocking stats from Pro Football Focus, you had 0 sacks, 0 hits, 0 hurries assigned to Braxton Jones for just the second time in his career. In fact, 0 sacks, 0 hits, 0 hurries, 0 pressures for Matt Pryor, for Bill Murray, for Coleman Shelton, for Teven Jenkins, for Braxton Jones. Darnell Wright was the only offensive lineman who was directly charged with a pressure. 1 sack was put on Darnell Wright. The rest of the offensive line was completely clean in pass protection. A couple of penalties in there that, technically are not clean, but as far as getting beaten and blocking 1-on-1 or 2-on-1, the Bears offensive line had as clean of a game as you could possibly hope. And that's what we've been waiting to see for this offense to look closer to its full potential. And I think there's a pretty strong correlation there between, they gave Caleb Williams plenty of time to throw and he looked excellent. It should be no surprise that he looked excellent with the offensive line playing as well as it did in this game. Now, it's easy to look at that and say, well, okay, but the Carolina Panthers are, one of the worst defenses in football and have one of the lowest pass rush win rates of any defense in football and have had plenty of injuries across that defense, including within this game, Jadeveon Clowney leaves with an injury and all that. They're not a good defensive line. We heard from Julian Council on Locked On Panthers last week about a lot of their defensive line concerns. And I think it's valid to say, okay, good for the offensive line to play well, but we also need to see them do it against better defenses. That's true. But I think part of what was encouraging for me about this offensive line performance in particular was not even just the one-on-one blocking, but the communication stuff. That had been such an Achilles heel for this line earlier this season against the Titans, against the Texans, where, sometimes guys are getting beat one-on-one, but there were other issues where they blitz or they stunt, and you need to pass off the block, from the center to the guard or the guard to the tackle, and the two guys weren't on the same page about who's supposed to block who, and they end up letting somebody come through unblocked or too easily blocked, or they're late to get over and try and block them because they didn't realize until it was too late that they were supposed to pick up that player. And it felt like against Carolina, the communication, the cohesion, working together as a unit was so much better. That, maybe the Panthers don't have a lot of D-line talent, and that one-on-one, this Bears offensive line is just going to be better in a lot of those blocking, pass rushing situations there. But the Panthers blitzed 12 times. It wasn't a crazy amount, but a literal dozen. And the Bears picked it up super cleanly. They picked up the stunts really, really well. They got the protections right. And it's that kind of communication stuff that was more frustrating, in week 1 and week 2, where it was okay, when in week 1 against the Titans, when Tavondre Sweat just, manhandled Teven Jenkins on a play, sometimes you can say, okay, you know what? That's a really good defensive lineman who just, or in week 2, Danielle Hunter beats Braxton Jones or Darnell Wright on a play. Sometimes you can chalk it up and say, hey, their players get paid too, and sometimes they're going to win their pass blocks or their pass rushes, and that's just part of the game of football. But the communication stuff, that's not about quality of opponent. That's something the offensive line purely can control. No matter who's rushing at them, what the name is on the back of the jersey or the team colors on the jersey, stunts are stunts, blitzes are blitzes. You got to be in the right position, communicate and work through that stuff and know where the pass rush is coming pre-snap. And the Bears have cleaned up so much of that part of their operation, and we saw that against the Panthers. And that's what feels more sustainable for me, right? They're not going to have every game like this where you're not really giving up pressure much at all across the board. There are going to be plenty of games when your linemen get beat sometimes. It just happens all the time. But the Bears seem to have moved past the basic football 101 issues of how do we block a stunt? How do we pick up a blitz? And that to me is something that they can continue even when the opposing pass rush gets better. When they face the blitzes from the Minnesota Vikings and Brian Flores in a few weeks, it's going to test that communication. And maybe they're still going to lose some one-on-one blocks, but if they can at least have everything picked up the way it's supposed to, and you still lose, that's okay. But make sure you're not just letting guys run through free the way that they were earlier in the season. That's real progress from the Chicago Bears offensive line. Some of that progress came from a change at left guard when Teven Jenkins goes down with an injury. Bill Murray steps in off the bench, not the Caddyshack actor, but the backup offensive lineman, and has a really solid game. And everyone's raving about Bill Murray now. And I don't think we all know how cool of a story he is and his rise to even get to this point and play well to the point now where I think Bears fans are having conversations about, does he remain in the starting lineup, and maybe you change the right guard and some combination of Bill Murray and maybe Teven Jenkins, or how you want to sort of fit Bill Murray into that mix. Let's not get too carried away from ourselves here, but I do want to talk about Bill Murray, his development and his story and where he might fit into this offensive line occasion next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, FanDuel wants to help you get rolling with a great start to your football season because they're going to give you a big return. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. $5 bet on anything, win or lose, they're going to add $200 in bonus bets into your account. So you could bet on Bears-Jaguars in London, where somehow the Chicago Bears are only 1.5-point favorites. I know it's a neutral site, and it's in London, and weird things happen in London, but the Bears just dominated the Panthers. And the Jaguars, well, they beat the Colts, but they've been struggling a bit lately. They figured some things out, but I'm 1.5-point favorite. Seems to me like something I'm going to put some of my money on. And if you put $5 on that, or WNBA playoffs, baseball playoffs, college football, tennis, soccer, combat sports, you name it, they've got it all at FanDuel. All it is a $5 bet, and boom, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So to get your big win, visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. The Locked On Bears podcast is sponsored by a new sponsor here on the show, our friends at Hillsdale College. I love learning, and I especially love the opportunity to learn cool stuff for free. And right now, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses, free, $0 and 0 cents. And they've got a great list there. I mean, you got your classic stuff like principles of chemistry and, mathematics and logic and civil rights in American history and introduction to the Constitution and stuff. But they also have some really cool stuff like history of classical music through Beethoven. They've got Shakespeare and literature courses and a bunch of fun, cool offerings here. And I got to say, it's a great way to be able to take advantage of the education of higher learning without the costs and student loan debt that come with higher learning. And all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with extra readings and quizzes and discussions, or just, enjoy the lectures and take it all in at your own pace on a subject that you choose to enjoy. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's Hillsdale, HILLSDALE.edu/lockedon to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This Chicago Bears offensive line looked good across the board, but it was particularly notable that Teven Jenkins goes down with an injury, and the Bears, sounds like it's nothing super major, but TBD if he's going to be able to play in Jacksonville or not. But even if he's not, the guy who stepped in for him in Carolina, Bill Murray, had a really solid game, looked really good. And we're talking about a very small sample size against a bad opponent. He ended up playing a total of, I think, 37 total snaps in that game, about half of the game. I think Jenkins played 34 and Murray played 37, if I'm double checking my numbers here on the fly. They both played exactly 37 snaps, funny enough. So Teven Jenkins got hurt exactly halfway through this game in terms of the number of offensive snaps. And I thought Teven Jenkins had been playing well too. He just got hurt. Bill Murray came in and picked up right where Teven Jenkins had left off. And it feels like a cool kind of revelation to say, okay, maybe we can trust this backup left guard a little bit more than we thought. Because Bill Murray is kind of came out of nowhere, was on the practice squad, third string type guy where you didn't really think he may, most of those guys never really pan out to do much for you. And that's okay. It's not like, I'm not trying to, be critical, but that's just how those plays generally go. But it turns out Bill Murray played really well. He had this aggressive streak to him that I really enjoyed. Even in pass protection, if there's a 4-man rush and he doesn't have a guy directly one-on-one with him, he went over to the left tackle, double teamed, and just bulldozed them, and then went over and found the guy who the center was blocking and tried to bulldoze him. Being aggressive and looking for work in pass protection is the kind of mentality you want out of your offensive lineman. He seemed to be smart, was able to pick up pass rushing exchanges well for a guy who was just coming off the bench. And it's the kind of thing where it's okay, given how the Bears have changed right guards, and generally the interior of this Bears offensive line has been more of the problem, do we need to consider whether or not Bill Murray belongs in this starting lineup. And again, 1 game and 37 snaps is not enough to say, yes, make him a starter for sure. But if Teven Jenkins doesn't play in Jacksonville, or in London against Jacksonville, and Bill Murray steps in and plays and has another good game, he's definitely going to be a part of that conversation. And I think it's really cool story, the way he's been able to ascend and get to this point, because you might not know that Bill Murray in college was a defensive lineman. And Bill Murray came into the NFL and played in the NFL as a defensive lineman first, converted to offensive line just a couple of years ago. And this was his first ever NFL regular season game playing on the offensive line, his first ever snaps in a regular season NFL game. And he comes in and plays that well. It's really kind of a cool story. Like, you look back, he played college, I think, at William and Mary, came out as an undrafted free agent in 2020 and signed with the New England Patriots. Was with them in the preseason in 2020 and on the practice squad that year. And 2021, they had him playing nose tackle, and then the next game they had him playing defensive end and covering on kickoffs, and then playing nose tackle in the third preseason game. But again, doesn't make the 53-man roster, is on the practice squad for his second season. Comes in for year 3 in the summer right before training camp, not even at OTAs, but like between OTAs and training camp, they say, Bill, why don't you try out offensive line? Initially had him at right guard, did some practice squad there, and then the next preseason he tried some right tackle as well, and gets cut from the Patriots at the end of the 2023 preseason. Then joins the Bears practice squad right at the beginning of the last year. Spent all of last year on the Bears practice squad developing and still getting used to playing offensive line, a brand new position for him, and now comes in 2024. We heard over the offseason Matt Eberflus raved about Bill Murray. He was one of the players he called out by name as someone who had a good offseason, good OTAs, and was earning more and more opportunities. And I remember even early in training camp, he was getting first-team reps with the offensive line, and we were kind of looking around saying, why is this third-string guard getting first-team reps? Maybe they're just trying him out, but this can't be sustainable, right? This guy just literally is just learning how to play offensive line after being a defensive lineman his whole career, dating back to high school and college. How can this guy be getting first team reps? But it speaks to how well he's developed, how well he's playing, and how cool of a story this is. And plus, if you look at his official, NFL PA headshot, that for every player every year, you get your official picture taken for all the lineup pictures and the media photos and stuff. He kind of just looks like a goofy, fun guy, and I'm left feeling like I wish we had gotten to know Bill Murray on Hard Knocks a little bit more, because he's got, the goofy kind of mustache in there. And I don't know, he just looks like a fun guy you'd like to hang out with. I mean, that's probably judging a little bit too much off of a NFL PA headshot, but I don't know. I find the Bill Murray story and his face and his mustache and the way he played against the Carolina Panthers easy and fun to root for. And someone who's okay, then could he be a part of this Chicago Bears starting offensive line moving forward? Again, I want to slow down on that a little bit, but at the same time, it's not totally and completely out of the question if he keeps playing well, because clearly he has ascended fast in his career, and we're still just scratching the surface of whatever Bill Murray is going to be as an offensive lineman. I mean, usually, if you think about a guy who comes into training camp as your third string offensive lineman, who's a few years into his NFL career or whatever, I'm trying to think of a good example of someone else from, I think about Jatari Carter, who didn't make the 53 this year, the Bears drafted a couple years ago in the late rounds, or Aviante Collins or, Jerome Carvin, some of these backups who have been around the NFL a little bit, right? You look at that player and you say, okay, well, they're in their 4th season in the NFL, or at least 4th training camp in the NFL. So they've got 4 years of doing that, plus probably 3 or 4 years of college football is 8 years, plus they probably played offensive line in high school, so they maybe have, maybe they've been playing this offensive tackle spot or offensive guard spot for 10 years. And you kind of feel okay, maybe at this point, if you're in your 4th or 5th NFL season and you're still the third string guy, are you going to all of a sudden, boom, turn into a starting caliber player halfway through your 5th season? It feels like maybe by that point, because they've been playing offensive line their whole life, they're not just going to have this miracle revelation of how to play it better, and maybe they kind of just are who they are at that stage of their career. But it's different with Bill Murray because he didn't start playing offensive line until 2 years ago. I mean, all these other guys have been playing offensive line their whole lives, so by the time they're in the NFL, there's still room to grow, but they're not, magically learning a bunch of brand new stuff about the position. Bill Murray is still learning brand new stuff about the position. You know what I mean? Like, he is still fresh at this. So there's a lot more upward trajectory for what he can be for your offensive line. Statistically, most likely not going to be a starter, not going to be a Pro Bowler, not going to be anything more than a quality backup. That's still great, but like, the possibility is there more for him. The ceiling is higher for him than a lot of other offensive linemen. And I think it's important to make sure we don't get too carried away, because we've had this same story with Rashad Coward a couple of seasons ago. Bears, I think, were the ones who converted him from the defensive line to the offensive line, and he did become a starter for them. He just wasn't very good and is since out of the NFL and in the XFL or the UFL, kind of jump between the both of them. So, Bill Murray could either be this diamond in the rough gem that becomes a surprise stud for them, or he could just be Rashad Coward. And either way, it's still a cool story and something I want to follow along closely here. But I want to look more bigger picture at, okay, regardless of Bill Murray's ascent here, where is this Bears offensive line going to be best? With Nate Davis now on the bench and Matt Pryor's in at right guard, but now Teven Jenkins has hurt Bill Murray. We'll kind of look at some of the offensive line combinations, and then also the role that play calling and offensive scheme plays in how well this offensive line has been playing and played against the Panthers. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. Whether it's a concert, a comedian, a theater show, or going to a Chicago Bears game, the best way to get your tickets is with the Gametime app. I have Gametime downloaded on my phone, and I use it all the time. I'm actually going to see a couple comedians in the next couple of weeks. Mike Birbiglia, we're going for my mom's birthday coming up here in a couple weeks, and then the comedian Lewis Black as well. Really looking forward to seeing them. And I got the tickets for mom's birthday on the Gametime app on my phone, because with Gametime, you can see the view from the seat in the venue before you buy your tickets. So you can know exactly what you're getting with your ticket purchase. And Gametime also lets you turn on all-in pricing so that when you go through the checkout process, there aren't any added fees at the end. You see upfront exactly how much the tickets are going to cost, and that makes the process so much easier. So that's why we always say, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. This Bears offensive line played well against the Panthers, and I don't necessarily want to be eager to say, hey, they played great against the Panthers. Let's change it. let's change the lineup then, right? But because of the injury situations, you at least have to sort of check in and ask yourself what the best version of this offensive line is and is going to look like, especially when Bill Murray comes in and plays really well. And maybe, if he's in the conversation as one of your two best guards, you start to have that conversation about, okay, well then, what should the lineup look like then? Because, okay, depending on Teven Jenkins' health, you feel like when Jenkins is healthy, he should still be one of your two best guards. I know he hasn't been that for the entirety of this season. He had some rough games to start this year, but I think we all generally, of all the guards, if we're talking Teven Jenkins, Nate Davis, Matt Pryor, Bill Murray, we have the most trust or faith or proof that Teven Jenkins is most consistent of that group. Even if he hasn't been as much this season, we have more years of evidence of saying, yes, when he's healthy and on the field, he's been consistent, but he's left the last two games with injuries, so that's a big if there. But, okay, in theory, if healthy, Jenkins is one of your two best guards. Nate Davis has been benched to the bottom of the guard rotation, so he's not really in the conversation anymore. That was a pretty notable thing. When Teven Jenkins got hurt, they didn't move Matt Pryor from right guard over to left guard and then put Nate Davis in at right guard. They just left Matt Pryor at right guard, brought in Bill Murray, and said, Nate Davis, you stay there. We're not even going to put you in as the first backup off the bench in this game. So he has been effectively and officially benched and really out of this guard conversation. So like as it stands right now, it's Bill Murray, Matt Pryor, Teven Jenkins when Teven Jenkins is healthy. If Jenkins is not healthy enough to play in London against Jacksonville, then it will just be Bill Murray at left guard and Matt Pryor at right guard, and there's not a lot of conversation to have here. But once Teven Jenkins is healthy, and once Ryan Bates is healthy, then we have an offensive line conversation here, because Ryan Bates is soon to be eligible to come off of injured reserve or to open up the 21-day practice window and then potentially come off of injured reserve. And now you got the center question added in there, because you've got Coleman Shelton playing. He played better against the Panthers, but otherwise has just not been very good at center. And so I think the feeling ideally has been, when Ryan Bates is healthy, plug him back in as your starting center, make Shelton the backup, and probably move on from Doug Kramer, put him back on the practice squad. But if you feel like Ryan Bates would be your best bet at right guard, the goal is have your three best interior players between Jenkins, Shelton, Pryor, Murray, and Bates. Who are the three best players there? I think Jenkins and Bates are the two best. So then is your third best player there Pryor or Shelton or maybe even Bill Murray? I mean, we'll see it if we get another week if we see him some more against the Jaguars, maybe he's in that conversation. But it does feel to me like when Ryan Bates is off of injured reserve and healthy again, and when Teven Jenkins is healthy again, those two need to be in your starting lineup somewhere. Jenkins at either guard spot, Bates at either guard or center. So then it's a matter of, if Bill Murray plays well against Jacksonville, then maybe he's your third best interior player, and you put Jenkins at one guard spot, Murray at one guard spot, and Bates at center, and that's your best version of the interior. Or maybe maybe Bill Murray, comes back down to earth a little bit and struggles against Jacksonville or whatever, and Matt Pryor maybe is your other best option. So then maybe you go Jenkins, Bates, Pryor as your interior. Or maybe Pryor struggles too, and you say, you know what, Coleman Shelton is settling in at center, and then maybe you go Jenkins, Shelton, Bates. I still feel like I would probably want to see Bates take over at center and move on from Shelton, but just like we'll give Bill Murray a chance to keep playing well, like Shelton played better, not great, but better against the Panthers, so he's got an opportunity to keep showing some more improvement there. I think generally he has had some trending up, even though there's been mistakes along the way, and he gave us a great hot mic sound drop from the game against the Panthers as well, dropping the F-bomb on the Fox broadcast. So I have some real appreciation for him there, because part of this conversation that I don't mean to just save towards the end here, but like the offensive play calling also matters a lot here, right? When we talk about picking up the blitz for Caleb Williams and having options for him, like a lot of that's play calling in terms of leaving guys in pass protection and also having routes for Caleb Williams. It's going the more play action and RPOs. We saw them do a little bit more of that against the Carolina Panthers. That makes the offensive line's job easier. And also in the running game, we've seen Shane Waldron continue to trend towards a totally different run scheme than what the Bears have been doing this season. They went even more gap scheme against the Panthers than any week before. They've kind of abandoned a lot of the zone running that they were trying to get rolling earlier in the season and said, no, we're just going to be more of a downhill power duo counter pulling guards type of running game that seems to be working a little bit better for this offensive line as a group, as a whole, they can get some confidence going in the north-south. Because like that's the other aspect of this here, right? We talked about how clean the Bears were in pass protection. Running game was good, not great, and would like to see more progress there. It's part of the equation for the offensive line is, yes, who's pass blocking well, but also who's moving guys in the ground game. I thought Bill Murray did a good job of that. I thought Teven Jenkins did a good job of that. Like they were getting some good push from the interior against the Panthers there, which helped some of the running success that they did have, but got to see that keep going. You got to be able to sustain that here for multiple weeks, not just against a bad Panthers defense. Fortunately, they're playing another bad Jaguars defense in London, although the Jaguars have been pretty good against the run. Their pass defense has been terrible. Their run defense has not been horrendous. So maybe that'll be a little bit of a better measuring stick, how well they run against Jacksonville, but I think we should expect Caleb Williams in the offense to get things going. I'm really looking forward to our Crossover Thursday podcast this week from Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars. Tony's one of my favorite hosts here on the Locked On Podcast Network. He and I, we've had some good nights down at the Senior Bowl and in Indianapolis at the Scouting Combine. You know, we connect really well as people and as friends. So we're going to have a fun conversation this week on Thursday here on the Locked On Bears podcast for Crossover Thursday. So make sure you come back for that conversation. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Tomorrow, I want to talk about this Chicago Bears offense finding an identity, what that means, what that looks like, and how to kind of sustain that moving forward, what we're seeing from this group and how that sort of shaped some of the offensive success they've had there as well. So keep making us your first listen each and every day. For a second listen, you can always check out Locked On NFL. I co-host Tuesday mornings with Tyler Rowland, but Locked On NFL comes out twice a day with Tyler in the morning and then Tony Wiggins in the afternoon. They both do a great job. They both put their own little personal twist and spin and energy to the podcast. They're two distinctly different sort of feeling shows, but they're both fun and a lot of fun to listen to. So go check out Locked On NFL. Coming back tomorrow, make Locked On Bears your first listen once again. And you got to come back tomorrow to get another opportunity to bear down.